Welcome back to the Lucky Orange Show. I'm your host, Sean McCarthy. And in today's episode, we're talking all about AI. And you might be sitting there and saying, I'm tired of hearing about AI. And I actually think that today's episode might be just for you if you're saying that, because we're going to talk all about why you should care and why it's actually making a huge difference in a variety of different business contexts. And so today, we brought in somebody who absolutely knows about all this stuff. Johann Van Tonder, CEO at AWA Digital and author of E-commerce Website Optimization, Why 95% of Your Website Visitors Don't Buy and What You Can Do About It, but also the AI Playbook for Research, CRO and Experimentation. Johann, welcome, and thank you for joining. How are you today?
Thank you, Sean. Good to be here. I'm doing well. We're recording this 9 a.m. in the US, 4 p.m. in my time zone. So you're getting the arse end of my brain on a Friday afternoon. Good luck with it.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. We'll get different energies. I hope to be fully awake. We hope to keep you awake and focused. So we'll get after it. AI Playbook for Research, CRO and Experimentation. I read through it. I looked through it the other day, and it's super powerful. And I'm curious if we could start there and tell me just a little bit about how you're seeing AI playing a role in those areas of research, CRO and experimentation.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. It's so just to say that playbook, I think it's available free at the moment, and maybe when the show goes out, it's still free on convert.com. And it's Craig Sullivan, Iqbal Ali, and myself, and we've spent years really playing with AI in many different contexts. And when we reflected on this, when we took about 2 months to actually write the book and put the prompts together. And when we reflected on our, what we learned over the time, we discovered and we realized that actually most of the stuff that we tried did not work. I can show you on my machine hundreds of attempts and half-baked little products, things that I tried, and it just didn't work. But of course, each one of those experiments is a learning, and it's a little bit of insight, and it's a little bit of hard-won knowledge in the trenches that kind of move you to the next thing and shows you what's possible and what's not possible. Your question, how it applies to CRO, UX, and experimentation, it's kind of hard for me to not give you the cop-out answer, which is I've come to the point where it's harder for me to understand how it not applies, how it doesn't apply. Like for me, I think I've completely changed my way of thinking about the work that I do, how I do the work, the kind of work that I should be doing, the kind of work that a machine should be doing. It's also been very humbling. Like, it feels good to think you're special, right? You've got this degree and that degree, and you've got 15 years of experience, and man, you know it all. And because of that, you should be doing the work because you're the guy. And then you build a model, you build something that frankly doesn't take you long to put together. And actually, the job it does in a fraction of the time that it would have taken you to do it is at least as good, but probably better. And I've had one after the other experience like that. And so to answer your question, and I think people in our industry should be all over this. It is, yeah. It's like magic.
And I think we continue to see a refinement of how people are thinking about it pretty quickly here. And of course, when we say AI, there's a question of like, what does that even mean? What does that represent? If we look back 18 months or so now, and ChatGPT kind of forces this to be a household conversation, people now, 18 months later, have kind of gotten over that initial hump of, wow, it can write 2,000 word articles in 10 seconds, and using it more so as a thinking partner, and using it more so as how can this make us more efficient. And a lot of things that I see people are saying, how can this get somebody a promotion? How can this make them better at their job? How can we deploy this, not kind of against our abilities as humans, but in tandem with it? And I think about a lot of the recent stuff with Google, where we're basically saying informational content isn't going to get a click anymore, and you're just going to get your answer right in the box there. And I imagine copywriters who have spent a decade writing informational content are saying, what is this? My life's work is now useless. But it's totally kind of like you're saying, reordering how we do things and think about our role in the business. And I'm curious if you could, reflect on that maybe a little bit about how you're seeing that evolve even in the past 18 months or 12 months.
That's a long window. So we should really be looking at smaller windows because it changes almost on a day-to-day basis. I mean, you wake up and there's something new. And I've been knee deep in this for 2-3 years. So I started experimenting with GPT before ChatGPT was out, GPT-2 at the time. And I still have regularly this experience where you go, this is not going to work. And then it actually works. And that's why I used the word magic earlier on. It does feel like magic. In the last 6 months, it is just, so you had GPT-4, which was pretty decent. Mm-hmm. Then you had something called Command R+, which very few people use, and it gets very little airtime. I think it's amazing. I use it a lot, and I'm really impressed by its performance. Then you get Claude. And Claude, the interesting story there is that the developers of all these models, they use standard methods to evaluate the performance of these methods. And one that's commonly talked about is called the needle in the haystack test. And what it does is you feed the model a large corpus of text, like an entire book or even more than a book, and you inject into that text a little sentence that doesn't belong there. And then the test is to see whether the model spots it, right? It's a little bit more nuanced than that, but that's kind of it. With Claude 3, not only did the model spot it, but it said in a cheeky way, here's the sentence that you're looking for that doesn't belong there. And by the way, it looks like it was planted there by you to catch me out, but you didn't catch me. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, and the developers were amazed. And for me, that's one of the most jaw-dropping moments in the history of LLM, because what does it say? It gives you this understanding of, well, firstly, our lack of understanding, because the developers were as surprised as the rest of us that the thing had the intelligence to be able to do that. So, and then very recently, Gemini 1.5 Pro, GPT 4T, I think it's pronounced not 40, but these things are just getting better every day.
Knowledge, I think the statement "knowledge brings ignorance" is interesting there, because we are learning more about what's possible with this, but we're also saying, oh, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't even think about that. I didn't even know that we could experiment in that way. I didn't know that we could consider our website in a certain way. Keeping things really practical here. Obviously, you are at an agency that's serving some of the biggest brands in the world. I list off Avis, Canon, Nike, Woolworths. Those are not names that are going to mess around with an untested and unproven thing, unless you may be really good at convincing them that they need to mess around with things that are on the forefront. What are those conversations looking like with clients of AWA Digital when it comes to applying these things to their work? Or do they not care? Do they just want to see the outcomes of the work?
It varies, as you would expect.
Yeah.
What I see increasingly with corporates is that they have policies, or they are developing policies, so AI policies, and some of them are quite forward thinking. And the people that we work with, because it's CRO and experimentation, they tend to have a more experimental mindset, and they tend to, be willing to just push the boundaries. And so we are doing a lot of, I would call, MVP, just kind of rough around the edges experiments, where it's not necessarily exposed to the public. It's not necessarily exposed to the broader audience, but we are playing with how AI and LLM specifically. So you made the point earlier, what is AI even? And you need to define it. I agree with you. And when I talk about AI, it's LLM specifically. So how LLM can be used to solve real problems. And I think that's key, because you get with AI, I guess, like with any other shiny new object, you get the question, there's this thing called AI. How do we use it? What do we do with it? That's the wrong question. The real question is, we've got these problems. How do we solve them? And if AI is part of the solution, well, then yeah, AI is. Let's talk about it. In most cases, it's not. But there are problems. So, for example, without mentioning specific clients, but most of our clients, we've worked with them for many, many years. And there's one specific client that I can think of going back 6-7 years, where right at the beginning, we had identified problems or opportunities, and we didn't really have a good way of solving it. And now with LLM, it's becoming a little bit more possible. It's allowing us to take a step in a direction that previously just didn't exist. And so I'm excited about those conversations. I must be honest, I get more of the other conversation, which is, hey, you know about AI? What do we do with it? And my response is always, no. It's what problems do we have, and is AI relevant?
That is definitely flying in the face of how a lot of marketers are treating AI. We'll see made with AI in a top nav bar, and then it ultimately is, basically just a conversational thing helping you come up with like a survey question. And we lead with that, and we try and pound it into messaging wherever possible to say made with AI, as opposed to letting it solve those problems. So I imagine then, when you're striking up a relationship with a new client, you're not saying during this part of the process we leverage AI. You might say along the way, we are known for our ability to use AI to solve your problems. But we're not saying, when we're doing keyword research or when we're coming up with test ideas, we're using AI. It's more so reactive to the problems that happen. And I'm curious if you're willing to shed a little bit more light on the types of problems that you're solving for people along the way using these LLMs.
Yeah, I can think of a couple examples. Just to comment on that last point, AI is completely invisible in our process. So I don't go into a sales conversation, for example, punting AI or mentioning AI at all. If it's relevant, if somehow there's a moment where clearly it's relevant, or the other person mentions it, or then I'll bring it into the conversation. But as far as I'm concerned, it's just a tool. It's just part of the process, and it's not the thing. It is the results are still important. The relationship is still important. So when people work with an agency, they have a problem to solve. The reason you go to an agency is because, there are a couple of reasons, but maybe you don't have the skills in-house. Maybe you want to fast track. So if you want to do CRO in-house, but you want to get help from somebody to get you out of the blocks faster and get, whatever reason. And AI and all of that is completely irrelevant. It's about, can we do what you want us to do? Can we deliver results? Do you like working with us? Is there rapport? Is there chemistry? AI doesn't come into the question at all. What problems do we? Well, let's start with internally, because I think that's easier to answer. The entire process from onboarding a client, AI, LLM gets involved there. So you've got your SOPs, you've got your documentation, you've got even lessons learned from. So the one thing we do a lot of is getting external consultants, independent people who have nothing to do with us, to phone up our clients and just ask them about the experience of working with us and what's going well, what's not going well. And we're particularly interested in the bits that don't go well, because CRO is all about making stuff better. And so that applies to us as well. So going back 10 years, we've got a wealth of information from clients to say, here's what we like, here's what we don't like that much. And you feed all of that into a machine, and everything that you know about a particular account or client or situation or context, and I should immediately point out that you never put, this shouldn't even be said, but let me spit it out anyway. You never put any sensitive information into an LLM that's exposed to the internet. But so from onboarding all the way through to doing research, doing analysis, you mentioned copywriting, briefing a test, a lot of A/B testing, doing post-test analysis, reporting. There's LLMs involved in every step of the way. And the playbook that you referred to earlier that that can be downloaded, it contains a range of recipes, prompts that you can put into ChatGPT that does text analysis, it does problem statements, everything through that entire end-to-end process. So internally, there's a lot of use cases. Then for clients, an example that I'm working on at the moment that I quite like is, imagine you go to a retailer and there's a product that's the kind of product where it's a big investment and you have questions about it. But there are categories of questions, but you and I may have different questions. And you talk to 10 different people, they'll have 10 different questions. And then the follow-up questions will also be different. And so that's the kind of thing where you can't just put an FAQ on the PDP and, there's just the universe of questions is just too big. So that's the kind of thing where an LLM can work really well. And we're busy testing that at the moment. And I'm quite excited about both the results that we're seeing there, early results, and the potential of where this can go. And it's an example of a problem that previously we just couldn't solve that now becomes solvable.
That's a really interesting idea. I mean, we talk a lot about how session recordings and heat maps in the Lucky Orange side are extremely valuable because you can start to see qualitative data in that the behavioral analytics, but it really only comes to a head when you're able to talk to customers, you're able to answer more direct questions. And those questions usually come from the worries that they have about buying your product or from your brand, or the reasons why they're motivated to potentially buy something from you. And the only way to know that, for example, they care about something being non-dairy versus it not having milk at a really simple level, like those are two different things. The only way we can know about that is by talking to them. But we can't, like you said, have an answer to 100 different questions. And especially when we go to deploy these things in messaging, we really can't just guess. And that's really where the experimentation part of this comes into things. I'm curious.
Well, Sean, I
go ahead.
just to underscore the point you make there about qualitative insights, qualitative, what people say to us, and through surveys and interviews and so on. There's the classic distinction that's made between quantitative and qualitative. Quant being the what is happening, qual being the why it is happening. And one way to think about this, we obsess over numbers. We look at our GA4 dashboards, all our marketing and Shopify dashboards, and we see all these numbers. And that's what we report. We forget that those numbers, those metrics, are a reflection of human behavior. So take conversion rate, for example. It's a reflection of whether people bought or didn't buy. And if you want to move something like conversion rate or any other metric that you care about, well, firstly, you can't. It is what it is. You're looking in the rearview mirror. But given that it is a reflection of human behavior, you've got to shape human behavior in order to move that number. In order to shape human behavior, you have to understand it. In order to understand it, There is no shortcut. You've got to speak to people. You've got to understand what's going on in their mind. And so that point is worth underscoring. And LLM, this is where I think one of the ways in which LLM, to give you a better answer to the question you asked me earlier, where in the process can LLMs be used? With doing qualitative research, if you've got 1,000 survey responses, previously you'd read through all of them. You do one of two things. You would read through a sample of it, or you'd read through all of it, and you'd kind of code it up. Or you would write some NLP script in Python or R if you have the knowledge to do that, and you'll do some NLP analysis. And now, within 10 minutes, if that, you can do really proper analysis on that qualitative data, and you can surface all those insights that you spoke about there.
Yeah, and of course, there's as you mentioned, the time to do something like that. There's an efficiency gain to be had there. But there's also kind of an effectiveness gain where you would probably spot insights, into your point earlier about the model being able to pick out that you added a sentence to try and fool it. It's catching things that the team may overlook. Even a well-intentioned experimentation team may just not catch. And so I'm curious how you see that. Is the primary impact the efficiency of the team to be able to work through more things faster? Or is it really a balance of, we can do this faster, but that gives us time to spend more time on the things that require the human brain to analyze and to communicate into whatever it might be on that side of things?
I've really not figured this out. And maybe some people have figured it out. I haven't. I listened. I was in a meeting with an agency owner the other day, and he was explaining how I think it's maybe a little bit clickbaity, but he was explaining how he increased his profits by 12 times by using LLMs. And that's not my experience. My experience is the opposite. My experience is that certainly I personally haven't saved any time. I've used many more hours. And as I said at the top of the call, most of the stuff I tried didn't work. Right. So the time I've sunk into this, man, if you had to pin me down and ask me for an ROI, it would be so negative on the time I've spent on it. Would I do it again? Yeah, I'd double down on it. I think about it this way. I don't think it is. I don't, certainly in my context, it isn't a tool yet that allows us to take one operator, one strategist, and give that strategist double the number of projects. It isn't that. It is something that allows us to think better. If you take copywriting, for example, I think it's a good example to talk through, because it's the classic one, right? It's one of the first tasks that we knew is, let's say, threatened by LLMs. But good writing is good thinking. And so the way I use an LLM is not to write stuff for me. I do a lot of writing with LLM, but it's to clarify my thinking. And so what I find with LLMs, the way we use it in our business, and certainly the way I use it, is it frees up my time to think, to use my brain, and to take the outputs of AI and the outputs of tools like Lucky Orange and make sense of it with a human brain. And then to play that back to another human brain, because my client, the human brain, doesn't want to talk to a computer. And so my job has become thinking on behalf of the client about all this stuff that AI spits out that, let's remind ourselves, AI would never spit it out if I didn't drive it. So the bit that gets outsourced to the machine is the doing the numbers, they're doing the grunt work, the actual step by step. But I'm directing it and I'm making sense of it and I'm reporting it back. I can't remember what your question was. Maybe I answered a different one.
You did. I think that's why things like the playbook that you've recently published are going to be so important as we move forward. When people try and operationalize this, you can't, it is great for somebody to go explore everything, and people should be willing to carve out time to explore these tools and how they can apply to their unique problems. But having that starting point of playbooks and prompts and ways to think about things will be extremely valuable. And I think when we look forward, a year, and I know that that's a dangerous jump forward in time with this. When we look forward a year, I think that's where people are going to start to be. Of course, the tools will be more advanced too. So the way you use them, but maybe the way you think about them evolves slightly slower. And so these playbooks and these prompts and these tools to be able to explore these things. And I imagine that comes into use with your team, at the agency, to say, it's not, you're not keeping these ways of thinking about this to yourself. You're not just hiding these from the team and say, go explore it yourself. And so it does feel like sort of not standardizing the approach, but making it to where people understand how their relationship should be formed with an LLM will become more of a table stakes thing. I think we're still at this place where people like you are exploring this and figuring out this is how we should do it. But it feels like in the future, kids will be coming out of college understanding the fact that this is how you do it. Now, there will still be a gap between the people who operate at a high level and those who don't. But it feels like that's, that's how we get smarter about this is everybody understanding where they're starting.
This is mad. It's such an exciting time because nobody knows this. Not even Sam Altman, who runs OpenAI, knows what the answer is. He doesn't know, and they don't know, and the people who develop this don't really know where this is going. That's scary and exciting at the same time. We are collectively, you, me, people listening to this, everyone is currently collectively figuring out the utility of this thing and how to use this thing, and nobody has the answer. And I think that's what, I encourage people to do. And I'm hoping that by now we're way beyond this point, but actually I keep on being surprised that there are people who say, well, one of two things, either, I don't bother with it, I don't get it, or people who say, well, I tried it once, I got it to write a bit of copy, it was crap, so I didn't go back to it. Man, what you need to do is just give it a chance. You need to play with it. You need to use the playbook as inspiration and do your own stuff, but just play with it. Do stuff with it. Figure it out. I agree with you. And the other realization is, right now, this is the worst these models will ever be. And already what is out there is pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah. Now, I know you just said something that you're excited about, but the question that I always end with, the last question to throw in, we could keep going on this for a long time, but the last question I have is, looking forward, what has you most excited? And we're already almost at the halfway point in the year, but what has you most excited as we head into the last 6 months of 2024?
Man, I'm so excited. I'm like a kid in a toy store. It is a couple of things. Number one, I think the world will fundamentally change. There'll be tectonic shifts. Already it's happening. But it's happening in slow motion, so we don't detect it. We don't see it. But I think the way that we navigate the internet already with things like Perplexity and the new Google AI, and I know that's getting a lot of bad press, but the world is changing, right? So the list of 10 blue links. Soon, you might be at a point where this thing that we know as the World Wide Web, this structure of websites, there's no reason for us as consumers to visit that. I know people will not like that statement. But is that a better user experience? Then it will win. If you're an alien and you landed here on this planet and I told you to go and buy something on Amazon or whatever, you'd look at this process and you go, but you guys are backward. Like, this is archaic. This is a shit experience. Is this the best you could come up with? E-commerce right now is a terrible experience. It's because it's the best we had. It's born in the 90s, 20 years ago, and we're still using that same mental model. I think it's about to be dismantled. It's about to be broken down. That's the kind of thing that I'm excited about. The other thing I'm excited about is this notion of agentic AI, where you've got a team of little LLMs that self-organize. So imagine this as you've got a CEO at the top, an LLM, and a series of VPs, each of them LLMs, and then an army of people reporting into the VPs. They're all LLMs, they're all bots, and they're going out and they're doing stuff. Man, I'm excited about them. That's real. That's already here. That's already here.
Yeah. I do have a follow-up question on the sort of the dismantling. When we talk about the role of the www website changing and maybe things becoming more app-centric, search-centric, whatever it might be.
Yeah, who knows?
Do you think that do you think that the importance of brand, and we could go a long time about what that even means, but do you think that the brand then becomes more important, or do you think that there's something else that might rise up that's just your presence within the model? And maybe that is brand, I don't know, but do you think that the role of brand evolves along with that?
I mean, I have no idea, but I think two things, and I think brand is part of it. It is about this. What can you do as a human, or we collectively as humans do that the machine can't do? And what is our strength? And one of that is the relationship, right? So it's the two of us talking and having a rapport and having chemistry. And that's the kind of stuff that a machine can't do. Not yet, and maybe never, but humans are social creatures. We know this biologically, we're made that way. The first thing that a newborn baby does is looks for eyes. We programmed to lock onto human eyes. And so you can extend that to an organization, an organizational identity, and let's call that brand. So the personality of an organization. So I think possibly, I think those things might become more important. Our humanness and the brand's humanness, if you will, brand.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of why this is also exciting, is because it's changing and we don't know. And we just have to be willing to pay attention and experiment and play with it. Johann, thank you so much for carving out some time in your afternoon, on your Friday afternoon. Before we call it, where can people find you online to follow along with how you're thinking about these things, and AWA Digital as well?
Yeah, so I'm active on LinkedIn and X. I still call it Twitter, and I'm quite active on both. I write about this stuff every day as well. And please look me up. Amazing. And connect. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for sharing your time and knowledge with myself and our audience. I really appreciate it. Exciting times ahead. We'll see what happens.
Love it, man. Sean, good to talk to you.
You too. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Lucky Orange Show. Before we go, if you haven't tried Lucky Orange yet, head over to www.luckyorange.com for a free 7-day trial of our leading conversion rate optimization toolkit. What's in that toolkit? Well, let's start with session recordings and heat maps. With session recordings, you can watch a full playback of an entire visitor journey on your website. Everywhere they click, scroll, move, everything they do in your site, a full playback. So you can see what's getting in the way of conversions and what is getting people over that finish line to convert. With dynamic heat maps, you can see the average visitor behavior on a page. So you can see clicks, moves, and scrolls. You can see how far down the page the average visitor is scrolling. And if something is below that line, that means that more than 50% of visitors are not seeing that. Lucky Orange also offers tools like live chat, announcements, and surveys so that you can communicate with your website visitors in real time. So again, if you have not tried Lucky Orange, or if you're not a user yet, head over to luckyorange.com, check it out, 7-day free trial with no credit card required. If you're a Shopify store owner, head over to the Shopify App Store to download the Lucky Orange app to your store today, as well as BigCommerce, HubSpot, Square, and many more. Check us out. and happy optimizing.